I decided at a very young age. Yeah, there was a brief cowboy phase, and then there was a really brief and strange moment when I thought I would. I somehow thought being in a motorcycle gang was like an occupation, like that was something that I could do. And then artist. And there was never a backup plan. I did my undergraduate degree at the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design in Halifax. And then from there, I studied at the University of Guelph for my master's. Halifax was great, a great place to study. A pretty conceptually orientated school. It's famous for having been a difficult place to paint. You really had to justify the practice. There were no givens. Like, why are you working on canvas? Why canvas? The first couple of years, I worked in film and painting, and painting won out. Film, just the process was just a little too cumbersome. And I was just spending more and more time in front of paintings. NASCAD, at the time that I was there, they had a loft in New York, and they had frequent trips. And the more time I spent in front of paintings, the more I was convinced that painting was something that I wanted to be engaged in a serious way. So I studied with Jerry Ferguson. He was a very influential teacher, influential character. Stayed in Halifax for a few years after I graduated. It was right in the midst of the recession of the early 90s. Typically, after people graduated, they left NASCAD, left Halifax. About 98% of the students attending NASCAD weren't from Halifax, so they would go back to wherever. But with the recession, recent graduates realized that Halifax was a pretty good place to be poor. So that was a pretty remarkable time. There was a crew of us. Kelly Mark was part of that crew, and Phil Grauer, who runs the Canada Gallery in New York, and I changed studios. I moved studios a few years ago, and I saw that as a good opportunity to switch up my practice a little bit. So for the longest time, I had been focused on works on canvas, and with this work, I wanted something that ran parallel to the works on canvas. It was a little more expedient, faster. I could work through ideas quicker. And Mylar, which is a synthetic paper, it doesn't require any prep, so you can work straight with oil onto the Mylar. And as soon as I got things set up in the new studio, I focused on the Mylar, and things really took off. The work is very influenced by technology. My using Photoshop has affected how I make paintings, but I don't use Photoshop to make the paintings. Yeah, the paintings have a lot to do with technology, but there's no technology used in the making. It's all very traditional. It's just oil paint. There's no tricky mediums. Figure ground has been working with figure ground relationships has been an undercurrent in the work for a long time. One of the fundamentals of painting, you have the ground, you put a mark on it, that mark is the figure, and through evolution, we're prejudiced towards the figure. So in the trees, picking berries, you're looking at the berry, the figure. You go to art school and you learn that the negative space around the berry is as important as the berry, and that realization changes how you see for the rest of your life. And painters are always playing with the relationship between figure and ground. So I was making gestural paintings where, through the process that I've developed, the figure element was made visible through an absence of paint, rather than the presence of paint. So the brushstroke was the canvas showing through, the initial ground showing through. And after working with that for a while, that became a bit simple, a little too simplistic. Like once you got it, then you had the code for the rest of the painting. And I wanted more complex trade-offs between figure and ground. Anywhere from like 4 to 12 different layers. And the layers end up being compressed. And sometimes initial layers end up being very important in the final painting. There's a point when early on you're always pushing. And then there's a point when you start following the work. And it takes you places that you couldn't have imagined. What I was saying before with that, when you learn about negative space and positive space and how that changes how you look at the world. Painting continually opens up these nuances in perception. And as a career, it's very unpredictable. And it physically takes you places that you couldn't have imagined that you would be.